listening to Connections Radio, the sound of business. I'm Louisa, Wizzi, and Magnussen with Dani Wallace on the Business of Inclusivity. Dani Wallace is an award-winning public speaking coach, motivational speaker, and champion of enthusiastic inclusion. Creator and runner of event The Big Festoon, Dani is a former homeless single mother and domestic abuse survivor turned seven-figure entrepreneur. The Big Festoon is a go-to for businesses and change makers, with next year's date selling out in 48 hours. After starting with just 70 delegates, the event is now being moved to a 10,000-person venue. Today, Dani joins me to discuss her event and work championing inclusivity in more detail. This is the Business of Inclusivity. Welcome to Connections Radio, Dani, and thank you for joining me today. Can you please start by explaining why building an inclusive business world is important?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. So building an inclusive business world, I mean, when we talk about when I talk about inclusion, it always feels like, of course, it's important. Like, why wouldn't we be inclusive?
Why would we ask this question? Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's interesting because I'm so ensconced in it. I forget that there are lots of spaces out there that aren't necessarily thinking about inclusion in the way that they could or they should. And two things are happening. One is that there are lots of different demographics that aren't being seen or heard. So they don't think that different businesses are available to them. And also those businesses are essentially leaving money on the table because they're not advertising, marketing, making sales available to different people from different demographics. Now, that might be to the queer community, trans community, Black community, it might be to the disabled community, the neurodivergent community, so on and so forth. And so if businesses actually stop with the tokenism of inclusivity and actually started to get enthusiastic about why now more than ever they should be really thinking about bringing people together. There are lots of people that feel separated right now, lots of people that feel like they're in silos. They're breaking out into sort of minority communities to keep themselves safe. Whereas businesses right now more than ever, with inclusion, with riots happening, all of that sort of stuff, we need to be finding places to move forward together and not divide ourselves further. And when we stop with tick boxing exercises and actually start to think, how can we make people feel more safe? Then inclusion starts to feel like something we want to do instead of something that we have to do.
I think you make a great point. I mean, I even got a job once because of my mental health conditions. Now, that's just positive discrimination, and it didn't work. It wasn't an inclusive environment. I didn't feel psychologically safe, and I left. But to be given a job because of a diverse reason, it's just as bad, isn't it? It's kind of what you say, and it's tokening it and tick boxing. So how do we get out of this tick boxing culture?
So, first of all, we've got to understand that when we recruit, it's absolutely necessary to recruit against talent. And I think this is often an argument that comes up like, do I have to employ a disabled person? What if they're not able to do the job? And there's a difference between making reasonable adjustments so that somebody who is able to do the job. So, for example, like fluorescent lighting, if fluorescent lighting triggers somebody's epilepsy, but that person is able to do the job, then surely the reasonable adjustment
Change
will
the
be
blooming light bulbs.
change the lighting and get the best person for the job.
Absolutely.
But if you're not even considering that, then actually you're not even opening yourself up to the pool of talent that's out there. So by sort of not even considering it, you're actually going the other way around. You're not recruiting against any kind of talent that's outside of your own frame or lived experience. And you're not getting a richness of a director's board, the richness of an employee community or a client community when you're doing that. So we've got to think for like talent first for sure. But then we've got to go fishing in the correct pools for talent. Now, I'm a speaking event producer, and one of the biggest difficulties we find is attracting different types of people to come and speak, because ordinarily in business events, particularly, they're not considered safe. They're often straight, white, very able spaces. There's absolutely no point in me just saying it via PR or via social media, we're a safe space. I've actually got to go out and do the work and prove that we're a safe space, which means going into various communities as a minority myself and saying and sharing consistently the things that we're doing. And in the first instance, people might feel just distrustful of that. So me going out into Black communities, for example, and being present and proving myself time and time again that I'm safe, eventually they'll see the work that I'm willing to do to to bring people closer to me. And then we start connecting on a human level as opposed to, oh, what does the white girl want from us? Or
Yeah.
what does the queer girl want from us, or whatever it
Looking at the
is.
similarities and feeling the similarities and what you could bond over rather than the differences. I think there's a point there, isn't it? Focusing on how we are connected
Yeah.
rather than how we are disconnected. And if we put so much focus on being Black, disabled, white, neurodiverse, if we put so much emphasis on this, we're forgetting the human connection that we are
Mhm.
able to experience with people from different groups.
Yeah, and there's things that we can do to make our spaces safer so that we don't have to be divided. So I think the first step is to understand that there's division because of the way that our social construct is. The second is to understand what has created the division. And then the next step is to understand how do we then welcome people. And that's going to take the people that want to create inclusive spaces to go out into different communities and prove themselves to be safe people, or, show that they're safe spaces. So, for example, we have a stage, and the stage always has a ramp. And that ramp is to share whether we have a wheelchair user or somebody with mobility issues, or any other disability for that matter, whether they have whether we have somebody on our lineup that's a wheelchair user in that particular event or not, somebody in the audience that is a wheelchair user can see themselves. So you can't be what you can't see. So
Mm.
allowing people to see themselves in spaces, or at least the possibility to see themselves in spaces, is a great step to start to move toward that.
I think that's fantastic. That's a really good point. It's almost like we have to make the reasonable adjustments before the people ask for them, because that's another thing, isn't it? That doesn't make you feel safe. If you're in a job situation, you have to ask because your working environment is making you feel uncomfortable. That makes you feel like like you're putting them out and like you're being
Right.
annoying, and that's not good. So perhaps there's a point here where offices and workplaces and event places like you're doing put the ramp in anyway, and
Yeah.
then you might attract a nice disabled person who's brilliant at their job, but wouldn't consider your workplace because you haven't adjusted for them already. I love that point
Yeah.
that
Or have a
you
really
made.
great or have a really great inclusion statement where people are researching things to go to, or employers to approach, or anything like that. Actually be very, very clear and loud about the reasonable adjustments that you already make and that you're willing to make, so that people can help identify themselves instead of feeling like they're a burden in asking. And I think that often restricts people from going for opportunities, for speaking opportunities, or even just attending events. So being really loud about how inclusive you are isn't virtue signaling. It's actually sharing with different people from different types of communities just how ready you are for them. So for us, we love members of the trans community. Trans kids are loved and trans people are loved, and we want to welcome them to our events. And as such, we have non-gendered toilets, we have pronoun badges, and we serve that on the front foot. We caveat right at the beginning of our events that we're an inclusive space and we're joyfully curious. So we're not putting the burden on anybody to educate
I
other than the
like
people
that.
who are being paid.
Joyfully curious. I like that a lot. What are the actual business benefits of having a diverse and inclusive workforce? Because we're talking about diversity. Is there an argument for diversity of thought?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. Because healthy debate moves us through things. And I think that if we've been working in silos for a long time, then it's very easy to have our own lens of the world
And
and
tunnel
our own,
vision.
yeah, and our own view of how to market things, or how to sell things, or, how to deliver on things. Whereas actually, if we are diversifying our audiences and our workforces, we can actually be asking each other with joyful curiosity, what can we do to do more? And then when people can see that we're doing more, guess what? They spend more. And
Mm.
guess what? They'll offer themselves up for recruitment more, or they'll be a valuable member to a director's board, so better decisions can be made, instead of all of us just kind of working in our little silos, whether it's a socioeconomic silo, a race silo, gender silo, whatever that is. When we diversify our audiences, our boards, our employee team, our staff team, so on and so forth, we get the benefit of finding out what other people need so we can provide it, and we can scale from there. So for me,
Mm.
it's a no brainer, like from a business perspective and from a life perspective.
It works both personally and professionally,
right?
doesn't it? If we've got happy keyword, it's better for the economy as well because we're going to bring more money into the country. If we've got
For
more people
sure.
in jobs, more people working, less recruitment because it's a bit of a revolving door. And even the recruitment business is worth billions because people are
Hmm.
constantly leaving jobs because they don't feel safe. Tell me about the Big Festoon. I've been aching to ask you about this.
Oh, it's a real labor of love. Um, So 13, 14 years ago now, I was homeless with my two children under the age of 3 at the time, having experienced domestic abuse. It was something that inherently, generationally, my family had experienced, and that was a cycle that felt like it was perpetuating. And once I'd found myself in a position where um, I was actually in a really great job, a fantastic corporate job working in learning and development. I'd been performing on stage for a long, long time. One of my trauma responses was actually to entertain people because if people were either laughing at me or listening to me sing, guess what they weren't doing? They weren't arguing with each other or hurting each other. So, what I decided to do at the point where really I was at my lowest was promise myself that if ever I was to survive this situation, I'd spend the rest of my life in service of spaces where people can come and feel safe. So, two things happened. One is that I created IATQB, it stands for I Am the Queen Bee, which has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the hope that the people that come and get in my world feel like they can declare themselves royalty audaciously. I don't care where you're born, how you're born, whose family you're born into. I'm not bothered. You can walk into a room and audaciously declare yourself royalty, like you
I
are
love it.
sovereign. And so our events started to kind of take on that format. And then the other thing that I did in conjunction with my sister, who works in the domestic abuse space, was create the Fly Anyway Foundation, which is a foundation, a CIC that helps people who've experienced domestic abuse build businesses. So the two things ran tandem. The event actually began as a women's business network because I wasn't very educated at the time, wasn't really sort of out and openly queer. I wasn't, really very aware of the sort of the gender fluidity of society. And the more educated that I did, I realized that I got myself, I realized that I just wanted to feel safe. And men hadn't made me feel safe. And what I needed to understand is that there are actually great men out there, fantastic men out there. And the way that we can share with more people is to share our values. And people that feel like we're a values match can come home to our space. So originally it was called Be Inspired, to follow on the bee theme. And actually, we found a more fitting name. Bees do this thing, Wizzy, when they are building something new, is they link arms, they lace legs,
Oh,
and I know, and they show the other bees where to build to. So what we're doing with the Big Festoon is we're creating a safe space for people to feel at home, but also to help educate them in all sorts of topics: sex and relationships, property and investment, money, mental health, disability, so on and so forth. There's no real theme to the topic other than when you're learning, you can become more successful. One of our basic human requirements is growth, and that success is safe. And a lot of people don't move towards success because they're scared. They're scared of money. They're scared of building relationships. They're scared of putting themselves out there. They're scared of being visible for all of the reasons we've talked about. So the Big Festoon is this place where we can all go and link arms together. It doesn't matter if you've been in business for 10 years or 5 minutes. The energy of the room and the values is what it's all about. And then we educate each other and move through that way.
well, it's clearly a huge success. I mean, you sold it out next year's event in 48 hours.
I
What do
know.
you put this remarkable success down to? How long has it been running, by the way, quickly?
So the event itself, in all of its guises, has been running for 5 years.
Right, okay.
Um, so we started with 50 people. We couldn't give away tickets. Like, I was trying to explain to people what I was trying to create. And it's very difficult to say, you just need to experience it. Like, please trust me, come to this event. And the first 50 people that came along was like, oh, Dani, we get it. Like, we get it. How can we be involved? And I was like, get a ticket to the next one. Tell a friend to tell a
Tell a
friend.
friend, yeah. Word of
And they
mouth.
did. Yeah, and they
Wow.
did. And through word of mouth and social media, people started to bring their friends and say, hey, we've been to this business event. Actually, they're not boring us with the topics. It's very joyful. There's lots of music, there's lots of chaos and wonderfulness. Then there's breakout spaces where, if people get dysregulated, they can go and chill out. They can come and go as they please. And still, we've got an excellent, really full program of edutainment, we call it. And through that and the power of social media, people started to tell a friend to tell a friend. So then when we got into our current home, which is actually the Bolton Stadium, um, we we sold it out in the first instance, and then we opened up the tickets for the next one, which is in March, sorry, 2025. And people were just like, oh my goodness, you've created such a buzz. We're going to buy tables. So people were just buying these tickets in batches. And we sold out sort of 800 in 48 hours. I had to, me and my team the day after the event was like, my goodness, turn off the tickets. So we can't
Yeah,
sell them
somewhere
out.
we can't cope. No, that's fantastic. That is really fantastic. How can we all work to create a more inclusive work in our individual lives? Have you got any tips on inclusivity?
Yeah. So the first thing is accepting that people's lived experiences are their lived experiences, and it's not our job to question that. What we often do is because we've not experienced it, we'll invalidate it, and this happens a lot for women. Women's lived experiences of being in the workplace. It happens a lot with trans people. It happens a lot with members of different races, Black community, Asian community, and so on and so forth. They have a lived experience that isn't our job as somebody outside of that community to question. So, first of all, we have to believe what people's lived experiences are and then think, okay, so how can I help this person feel safe? What have they experienced before that has made them feel unsafe? And what can I do to be a great ally? So, the first thing we've got to do is shut up and listen, like listen to people and not question it in terms of invalidating their experience. But if we're going to ask a question, be joyful about the intent behind that. The question is, how can I help? How can I help you feel more safe, right, in the
And it could, for
workplace?
example, be using the appropriate pronouns, couldn't it? In sort of
Right?
in gender and in that category of diversity and inclusion, it can be respecting that somebody. And sometimes I think one pickle people get into is if somebody's changed their pronouns, and
Yes.
then they get very upset if the wrong ones are used. Now, it is our job to be making them safe, to get used to the new pronoun. This is how this person wants to be identified now. We need to
Yep.
get used to it, but also from the part of the person who's changed their pronouns, I think an acceptance that it might take people a while to get used to it. And I think I've
Correct.
got friends who are very good at that, because I mess up sometimes. They're like, Wizzy,
Yes.
Wizzy, that's not
Absolutely.
how, that's not how I identify. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And I genuinely try really hard to get it right. But it's acceptance both ways, isn't it?
100% agreed. It's not about like hitting each other with a stick when we get it wrong. So I think it's the acceptance from everybody, as long as the intention is good and people are willing to try. And if you get it wrong, apologize and move on. I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that. And then just call yourself in, call yourself out,
And think
and
twice
crack
before
on.
you let yourself sort of slip up like that again, get
Yeah,
used to
slow
it. This is
down.
the world we're in.
Yeah. And apologize and move on. I think people are very aware when you're utilizing, especially when it comes to pronouns, if you're misgendering somebody on purpose and when you're not misgendering someone. I think most reasonable people understand, unless, of course, they're in the throes of their transition, which is a very tumultuous time for somebody. And so, again, apologize, move on, not make it about yourself. So if you do muck it up, it's not, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And then that
And
person's got to
stop
make
going on
you feel
about it. Yeah,
better.
yeah, yeah. Because then you're completely changing. You're supposed to be trying to make them feel safe, and then you've
Yeah,
messed
not the
up,
other way around.
and now they've got to make you feel safe about making a mistake, and it's all ah.
The same with the
What you
same
said
with
about
people who have a
slow down is
disability.
key. Yeah.
Yeah, slow down, apologize, move on, and
Mm.
not be dismissive of yourself, but just be respectful of the fact that it's not the other person's job to make you feel better. It's our job to make each other feel comfortable and
Yeah.
and move through it together. And it's that joyful curiosity. It's not expecting the person with a lived experience to educate you. Like Google is definitely your friend. There are
Mm.
excellent resources available to go and educate yourself, and taking that responsibility upon yourself to joyfully be curious and learn in different spaces without burdening the person that you are interacting with to do the education, unless they're volunteering it or unless you're paying them to do so.
Yeah. If money's involved, that's a totally different matter.
Yeah, I'm educating people all day long, paying me.
So the Big Festoon, the next one is March 2025, is that right?
Yes,
Are
it
there any
is.
tickets left?
There are no tickets left. There are sponsorship opportunities left for
Sponsorship
people who,
opportunities.
yeah. So if people have a business that want to be aligned and want to raise themselves up to a really diverse community, a welcoming community, there's great opportunities there. We are looking at so 2026 is when we move into the Manchester's AO Arena, which is
Is that the
huge. There's gonna be
10,000 people arena?
yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you. But yeah, there's going to be lots. The tickets and the wait list are going to go on sale in March for that event. And I think we'll be having one more smaller event in September next year. So if people follow at the Queen Bee Dani or at the Big Festoon, and they can jump on the wait list, and we'll give them all the information as it unfolds.
And how does the sponsorship work? So if I'm a business, I'm Wiz Media, I want a table, I want a big banner, I want all of this. I want to talk about my business at your event. Is that the kind of thing you invite for
Yeah,
sponsorship opportunities?
absolutely. Yeah, there's exhibitor opportunities. So we have a brilliant exhibitor village. So if you've got a business that you want to put in front of our audience, then there's spaces there. We have a VIP evening. We've got Gok Wan actually DJing at our after party.
Oh, fantastic.
So there's
DJing. I
lots.
thought he did clothes.
Yeah, he's an incredible DJ. In
Wow, I did
lockdown,
not know that.
yeah, he has a whole like music community called Isolation Nation. So he's bringing that to the Big Festoon in March. But there's an after party that you can sponsor and really put your people in front of and align yourself with the brand, and obviously, Gok's performing. So yeah, there's lots of exciting opportunities. Again, all you need to do is get in touch with us via social media at the Queen Bee Dani or at the Big Festoon. And we've got lots of ways, from the sublime to the ridiculous, ways that you can come and get involved.
Fantastic. Well, Dani Wallace, thank you for joining me on the Business of Inclusivity. You've just mentioned just give those credentials again, what your address is for people to follow you and get in touch about the event.
So at the Queen Bee Dani, that's how you get in touch with me directly. And it's at the Big Festoon over on Instagram, but it's at the Queen Bee Dani, and that's across all of the channels. Anywhere that your phone sort of is directed in, at the Queen Bee Dani, there you will find me.
Well, Queen Bee Dani Wallace, thank you again. Good luck with the event in March. It was so lovely to talk to you today, and have a lovely day.
You're an angel. Thank you for having me.
What was it for you?